You guys all ready?
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Tuesday, October 10th meeting of the Pine Bluffs Town Council. Will everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item is our agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next item is the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next, we have Laramie County Sheriff Brian Kozak and Under Sheriff Chance Wakama. We have a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am here to present a commendation certificate to you, Chief Austin Smith. And if I may, I'll read the commendation into the record. Chief Austin Smith, for your exemplary dedication and exceptional actions in the line of duty, it is my privilege to commend you for your exceptional service. On August 23rd, 2023, at 1:23 p.m., a shooting incident occurred in Laramie County that resulted in the tragic loss of life. Your swift response, effective coordination with your team played a pivotal role in locating and apprehending the individual responsible for this senseless act. Furthermore, your leadership during the subsequent traffic stop, conducted in collaboration with other dedicated deputies, showcased your exceptional ability to manage high-pressure situations. I'm also pleased to acknowledge your diligence in the aftermath of the incident. Your relentless efforts led to the discovery and recovery of the firearm that the suspect discarded during the course of the event. This level of commitment to detail and thoroughness underscores your commitment to ensuring safety and well-being to our community. So just on a side note, the chief told me after the shooting occurred, the next morning he couldn't sleep. So he got up extra early. Harler, did you get up?
Yeah, early.
He got up really early to go out and look for that firearm along the interstate. And by gosh, he found it. So for your remarkable actions on August 23rd and your continued dedication to upholding the law and preserving the safety of our citizens, it is my distinct honor to award you the Laramie County Sheriff's Office Commendation. This certificate serves as a testament to your exceptional service, your professionalism, selfless dedication to duty. Chief Smith, your actions exemplify the very essence of what it means to serve and protect. Thank you for your outstanding service to Pine Bluffs community and to the broader Laramie County area. It is my privilege to work alongside you and recognize your invaluable contributions in pursuit of safety and justice. So, Chief, come on up here, and I'd like to give you, first of all, challenge point. Thank you.
Sir? Thank you.
Picture. And we also have a certificate of commendation that goes along with that. And again, thank you for everything you did to help us.
Thank you.
So that was a great catch.
Wait, one more.
Okay.
Hold it.
I think Penny wants a couple too.
Yes, could I get you by the flags?
Oh, sure,
please?
sure,
That
yeah.
way I don't have the glare on the TV.
The military in us is kicking in. That's good.
Chance, you better get in there.
Better.
You want me to take a picture with your phone? Okay. Yeah. Oh. Okay.
The other guy, his partner.
Yeah. So Mayor, again, thank you for such a great hire. A lot better than the last chief you had. While I'm here, any questions you guys might have of myself or Chance?
Well, I would just like to say, we said it at the county elected officials meeting, but your contributions in Pine Bluffs for our situation here are just outstanding. I was super proud of everyone and how they work together, and, you know, your willingness to, you know, I know that's your duty, your job, but when you see it in action, it's pretty remarkable, and the efforts of all of your folks and folks from other agencies doesn't go unnoticed from everyone in Pine Bluffs. And on behalf of the citizens of Pine Bluffs, and you guys are welcome if you'd like to say something, but on behalf of everyone in Pine Bluffs, we really appreciate everything you contributed to that. And furthermore, not to bogart all the time here, but I really have appreciated the direction we have taken in terms of relationship between the county and the town of Pine Bluffs, and I look forward to that continuing to thrive. So we appreciate it, and congratulations to you guys on a job well done.
All right, but thank you. And just to give you an update, we're getting closer to deploying our school resource officer in the schools here. There's back and forth with the attorneys, but I think we're getting closer. I'm actually hoping after Christmas break, maybe, it might be
Great.
done, so, thank you.
Nice.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Anybody
thank
else?
you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. All right. I forgot, Austin, did you want to give a speech?
That's a really quick answer.
Moving on to new business. Item number 1 under new business is discussion ordinance 2017-04, an ordinance amending Chapter 6 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Pine Bluffs, Wyoming, defining and regulating parking of recreational vehicles and providing for an effective date. I guess I'm happy to discuss. We had some, I guess I brought this up because I personally wasn't really comfortable with where we left it off last time, and even though we had an action taken, I think we can revisit that item. Is that correct? So, I'd just like us to give this some more thought, and I know Dave and others probably have done some research into this, and I don't really know where to start other than maybe we start around the room if you have any thoughts, or we can start with Dave, whichever.
Well, as I was thinking about this and doing a little research, I was kind of wondering, so what is our end goal here? Are we looking to just get like RVs off the streets? Are we looking to eliminate that safety hazard? I know that the topic of other types of trailers has come up too, whether they be enclosed or just like an open trailer. Is it to get those type of vehicles off the streets, or is it like all vehicles of that type, or are we only concerned about like RVs or a trailer that you could use as a temporary dwelling?
Sure.
So that was my first question, was I wasn't sure, what our end goal was. If we, because you could go so far as to include all trailers. I don't know if that's a step we want to take or not. That might meet with more resistance. But you could go so far as to include like enclosed trailers, which do probably restrict visibility, especially near an intersection. And so, by that very nature, they present, you know, an additional safety hazard that maybe an open trailer wouldn't necessarily pose.
So, I guess I would say, for me, you've hit the nail on the head. Like, what is the end goal? And over weeks of trying to determine what our end goal is, for me personally, I have not come up with a reasonable explanation in my mind of either the current ordinance or the changes we were proposing to make during our last discussion of this item. I couldn't answer that question. And every time I thought I'd narrowed it down to maybe what the real set of issues were, I came up with more and more complex issues that seem to be favoring one group over another. And so I would just like to state that that's my difficulty with this subject, is that I can't answer that question, and that bothers me. That bothers me to the point of wondering about the necessity of the ordinance if we can't answer that question.
I feel like there's merit in having an ordinance. I kind of like a lot of where we're going the last time we had the discussion of having, you know, a period of time like from May to October where you could park your recreational vehicle on the street, which does provide some months of the year that we know that they're not going to be parked on the street. I think they can be a safety hazard, and I like the idea of getting them off the street at least part of the time. But it's got to be something that is reasonable for our citizens and reasonable for our police force, who are going to be faced with the task of enforcing it. So I don't want to put undue burden on them for sure.
We have other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to know, has it ever actually caused a safety hazard? What is the hazard with and if it's not a hazard 1 month of the year, why is it substantially more another month of the year? I kind of felt like all of it was an ordinance in search of a problem. I think our original goal was to keep from obstructing sidewalks and roadways. And that turns into a simple matter of, you say you don't obstruct sidewalks and roadways, and then it just becomes a simple matter of law enforcement. If they see a trailer or something that's obstructing the roadway, they can go knock on their door and say, you know, this is becoming a hazard, we need to deal with it. But to create an ordinance around something that is potentially a problem but hasn't ever actually really been a problem seems like a lot of legislating for no good reason. That's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I'm leaning, I'm leaning towards Dennis's thoughts there, especially when Dave asks, like, what's the end goal? Kind of why are we doing this? I did reach out to Mills today, and their whole thought process and their whole motivation for this was they have really narrow streets in Mills, and they can't, if someone's parked on both sides of the street, they can't ever get a snowplow down it. So that's a lot of their motivation for that. They're really pleased with how this has worked out, but we've talked a lot about that not necessarily being the case for us. I do agree, if you're blocking an intersection or a sidewalk, or you're in the road too far, those become issues for other drivers and pedestrians but, I'm struggling because I feel like when you look at an ordinance like this one, while now you're being more inclusive and you're not just picking out people with campers, then it becomes so much for the police department. It also feels like we're starting to tell residents, like, hey, it's really hard and expensive to live here right now, and you can't keep all of your things. So I guess that's where I'm struggling, is that it feels really, it kind of just feels like it could become a burden.
Do we really want to create a nanny state in Pine Bluffs, Wyoming? I don't personally. So.
Janet hasn't talked yet.
I probably fall closer to what Dave's been saying, in part because I do think there was some merit to the original ordinance in regard to helping clean up. That was one of the original, long ago, why it was done, to move those ones that were just sitting there rotting. And I think having it limited for the whole year perhaps is a little bit too extreme, because if you can move it at one point, then clearly it's not, rotting on the side of the road. So I probably lean more towards not having it during certain months of the year, in part for snow. It gets slippery. You gotta move it sometimes. Usually we have good warning for snow, so people could move, and we just say, oh, a storm's coming, you gotta move it. But I think that could cause a lot of headaches, or get some people upset, especially if they're out of town and it snows, but their RV's there and they get, in trouble for that. So I think doing it for part of the year where there was some kind of restriction on it might be that happy point where you're not totally letting whatever happen on the sides of the roads, because those RVs, especially the very large ones, do take up a lot of space. And I know we have in some places pretty large roads, but they're not all big. They're not all very broad. But even if they are, if you have two RVs on each side, it does cut down your view to what you can see, more so than any car or truck would. And they do cause problems for, when we're trying to take care of our streets, either snow plow or street sweeping or what have you. So I guess I would lean towards having some kind of power to move it, but not always, just so we can help maintain the cleanliness of our streets, I suppose, overall.
So, one of the things I would comment about your comments is, I wasn't involved or probably didn't pay attention to when the ordinance was instituted. I think one of the concerns you bring up is a valid one about the overall cleanliness of our streets and our towns. But, I think we could speak to this, but we have ordinances about unlicensed vehicles, about vehicles that are in poor repair, and I think, part of it makes me feel like if that's one of our reasons, then we just need to take care of the other ordinances that are already on the books rather than stacking an ordinance on top of it that's very specific to a certain type of vehicle or a certain type of trailer. And so, and I think, we could talk about that with the chief, but it appears to me that the department has made it an effort recently to start getting after people with unlicensed vehicles and vehicles that obviously have no potential to being moved, like flat tires and things like that on the street. I don't know if that's far enough or not far enough, but I think, I think that's one of the things that to me feels like if that's a problem, then we need to work on enforcing that existing code. But I don't know. As I said, I don't have a really good answer for this other than it feels like, really feels like a situation about where do we stop? Where's our, A, what's our end game, and B, even if we can define what our end game is, whose stuff do we stop with? Whose giant van do we stop with? Who's the guy that drives the box truck to work to haul goods every day and parks it in front of his house? Understandably, it moves every day, but every evening it's parked in front of his house, and it's pretty decent size. I'm not even saying we have one of those in town, but
Right.
let's imagine we did have one of those, and now this particular person is wondering why we're picking and choosing what's able to be on the street. I'll tell you, I'm more thinking of some kind of rule that says the widest allowable by law is 102 inches wide. If your stuff doesn't fit within 102 inches of the edge of the curb, thus pullouts, thus craziness, then you're in line for a misdemeanor. Or hopefully we go tell them that that's a problem and we don't issue a citation. But, something like that where and then the sidewalk issue. And then maybe even a setback from the corner. To me, those are the three biggest safety issues. The sidewalk, the setback from a corner, and the distance away from the curb out in the street with the slide out or something to that effect. But I'm just thinking out loud,
So, when I was pondering this whole thing, part of what I was struggling with is there's people that they have box trailers that are part of their livelihood. They're, if they have their trailer that they have their woodworking equipment or whatever it is that they're using for their livelihood, are we gonna now tell them, well, your trailer's okay, but the other guy's trailer's not okay? Where do we, that feels like you're entering into where you're not getting equal protection under the law if I'm saying, my trailer's okay, but your trailer's not okay.
Well, you made one distinction that I think is pretty clear there. One of them uses their trailer for their livelihood. One of them uses their trailer for recreation.
Yeah, how do you know the difference between the guy that's got his snowmobiles in there and the other guy that has his hardwood flooring business in there? Now you're having to dig into them to find out what they have in there.
Yeah. And the current ordinance, it talks about it being a temporary living space. So
Yeah.
I guess in an enclosed trailer, you don't know. I mean, you probably would just assume that that's not a living space, unless it happens to be open. But if there's no walk-in door or no window in it, I would not probably consider that a living space. But I know people.
but
they use
the
it.
flip side is how does that pose a bigger threat
How does
to safety?
How does an
How does the living space propose a bigger threat to safety than the enclosed trailer?
I don't think either one poses any more or less of a threat. It's just one of them is potentially being used for your livelihood, as to use your example, and one of them isn't. I could probably get behind no ordinance if we had some kind of restrictions on the setback from the intersection and the setback from the alleyway. So that we don't have a large box trailer of some kind, making it difficult for anybody who's trying to make a turn in an intersection or come out of an alley and can't tell if there's somebody coming from the blind side direction.
I kinda like their
Actually,
I think
Yeah.
their deal on here is good, if they could come with a whiteboard and explain
explain
how,
that triangular thing.
how
is.
section 3 is like meant to work in practicality.
Right.
But I like something like that, where we have a reasonable, visual obstruction ordinance, kind of that being part of it, where we don't need to park right up against the
Right.
intersection or the alley.
I agree with Dave, I could easily agree to like some way to find a setback from alleyways, from intersections, and maybe something going too far into the street or a sidewalk. But something that's a little more minimal, such as that, is something that I would be in favor of.
And I agree completely with not creating obstructions, that you don't obstruct the view, you don't obstruct the sidewalk. But as far as whether you wanna park your boat in front of your house, I feel like that's your business. You ought to be able to park your boat in front of your house, so long as it's not creating a visual obstruction that's a hazard of some sort, or obstructing the sidewalk.
Right, and I think I would agree with that, and I don't wanna let Ally's point fall under the radar, that at some point, people choose to live here for a variety of reasons, but I will say we don't live in the most economical place in the country. So we've already got a pretty high barrier to entry, and on top of that, if you have a few things you like to keep around, now we're telling you, you need to go find an off-site parking spot and you need to pay for that, which is, many communities have that. I'm not sure that's for our community, but. Alex, would you like to weigh in?
May I? We currently have ordinance number 13-300, an ordinance prohibiting obstructions to sidewalks, streets, and alleys by overhanging branches of trees and other obstructions and by parked motor vehicles. This is a very dated ordinance. While I don't have the date on it here because it's missing a page, but I can tell you it was done with a typewriter, so it's pretty old. So maybe we could just look at updating this existing ordinance to.
So what's the ordinance called again?
An ordinance prohibiting obstructions to sidewalks, streets, and alleys by overhanging branches of trees and other obstructions and by parked motor vehicles. So while a trailer or a camper isn't necessarily a parked motor vehicle, we could, like I said, maybe update and modify this existing ordinance to encompass, and again, I'm missing some pages on the scan here, but if we were to get the full version of that, it probably lists trailers of some sort, and we could, consider maybe abandoning the RV ordinance and updating this existing ordinance regarding obstruction. Just a suggestion.
I would much rather make this simple and easy for our citizens. I agree with you, Dennis. I just, I've experienced the visibility issue on a number of occasions, and if we can address that through another ordinance and then get this one off the books, I think we'd kill two birds with one stone. I think that'd be great.
And I don't, one of our concerns before, and I don't know whether I've said it in a public meeting, but I specifically talked to a resident who had went to great lengths to comply with the ordinance as it's written now. And despite their efforts and financial burden and everything else, they still do not believe in the ordinance as written. Even though they've completely fixed their own issue. But Alex?
Yeah, a couple of observations. It's always kind of a really difficult judgment call in the governance process to identify, where the interest of safety ends and where you're starting to get into the arena that normally covenants would cover. So, I would caution, first of all, making giant covenants that cover the entire city. Like, you can't park here. I mean, if you go to Denver and you go through the subdivisions, there's very little parking on the street because you have to park in your parking space and in front of your garage or in your garage, and you have to put the trash in a certain place. And those are all covenants that are imposed on the subdivision when it's developed. And I'm not sure if it's the role of government to impose covenants. Now, with regard to the site triangle issue, when it comes to enforcing that and prosecuting that, the thing from Mills would have been an absolute nightmare. There's no way in the world somebody's going to get out their tape measure and determine whether they can park or not. Forget the ordinance, invest a few bucks in yellow paint, and paint that place if you don't want them parking there. Then they know it's very apparent, no parking, put a sign up, put yellow paint down. If they're parking there, chief comes by, gotta give you a ticket, you're parked on a yellow. And the reason I say that is because a lot of intersections we don't have controlled intersections from the standpoint of green, red, and yellow lights, but we do have stop signs. So if somebody's got a stop sign, they're gonna pull up far enough that they're gonna see if somebody's coming. And so, I kind of think that one might take care of itself. Other ones, where it's just a right-of-way issue and, then they might not be able to see that person that's on their right. That's a different deal. But if it's controlled and they're supposed to stop,
This isn't quite the same.
they're supposed to look. And somebody parked on along that edge is probably not gonna impede them from seeing someone coming. But there again,
This would be
if it seems suitable in some areas to go ahead and paint back that strip that you don't want people parking on, at least let them know they can't park there. Then we've got a shot at making it stick.
So what do you think the complexity in this? Don't wanna waste a bunch of time. Why wasn't it just like 20 feet from the apex of the curve? Or,
Well, they're borrowing engineering principles on site triangle. It's traffic engineering.
okay,
And that's where the tree thing comes from. And like in the UDC, in Cheyenne, they've got those all mapped out and diagrammed, and different intersections have different site triangles and that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. I think for our purposes, though, I guess the patrons of Pine Bluffs tend to be probably be a little more cooperative if there's some visible notice than they would be if somebody just tags them. And then you get into the debate, well, where were you really parked? Well, I took this picture and I tape measured it off and I measured it back and I looked at and so you were guilty. And I'm supposed to do that to know where I'm parking? That's what I'm saying. I mean, it gets muddy.
Chief, do you have anything to add to this?
I would agree with Alex that there's a lot of uncontrolled intersections in different places I've lived, do have the yellow paint marked. There's a couple intersections that I think we need to do some red paint, for the fire hydrants on the corners. That's something that I've noticed as well. So I would agree with Alex on that point. It'd make it a lot easier to enforce, if we just mark it out on those intersections. Mostly with the stop signs, I don't think we would need to do that, because again, I agree, they're stopping, you have the duty as the person that needs to stop fully and look both ways and then proceed. And, most of them, they have those stop sign issues with campers or even semis or whatever the large vehicle is, whether it's a boat, doesn't matter what it is. Most people proceed out with caution anyway. It's the uncontrolled intersection that I'd be more worried about, and I agree with Alex that just painting those curves that way. You know where you couldn't or can park something big like that. I don't think a passenger car would be too big of an issue, but when you're talking about sight lines, it very well could be if it's a larger profile view.
Oh, on a side note, I've spent a lot of time in Australia and New Zealand, and they don't use stop signs there. They use yield signs almost everywhere.
They have a lot of roundabouts.
They have some.
Rounded curves.
They have some roundabouts in New Zealand, but they still have a lot of just square intersections. But they don't use stop signs. I went searching for them in Nelson, New Zealand, trying to find a stop sign. They just don't use them. They use yield signs everywhere, and it actually works really well.
But they were founded by criminals.
Well, that could be. But I just found it interesting. What is the necessity to bring your vehicle to an absolute complete stop at an intersection?
Fair.
So
Could you
long
pull up
as
that
can-
ordinance? Maybe I'll fix that too.
Yeah, maybe,
That's neither here nor there, but I am not a huge fan of stop signs everywhere, so. But yield signs,
Yeah.
I'd go for that.
I don't have anything else. I do really think maybe this other ordinance maybe doesn't require that we get into the nitty gritty on this, on the angles and all of that, but maybe it needs the small amount added that vehicles include campers and things, and
Yeah.
philosophically, to me, this goes back to where our law enforcement goes and talks to someone and says, hey man, you're kind of creating an inconvenience here. Could we change it? I would say you're 95% effective with that approach. I don't know that, but I would guess you would.
From what I've gathered, just from going around to these different areas and contacting residents, I would say most all of them have complied with how the current ordinance is written, and with just agreeing that there's a site issue there and have moved. Even the semis, I've contacted a couple residents about maybe parking further up the block instead of right on the corner, things like that, that I've also contacted as well. So I would say we've gotten pretty good it wouldn't be hard for us if there's an issue to go knock on a door and say, hey, can you move over the block?
Something like that would be my preference too. Is not getting so in the weeds on this and updating whatever we currently have.
I would definitely say, no slide outs need to be out towards the road, or even towards the sidewalk,
Yeah.
unless it didn't create an obstruction and people can walk on the sidewalk still. But anything towards the road, I think, is a risk, that the town doesn't need to have, but especially the person whose camper it is.
But also, I mean, I feel like that is a better fit in that other ordinance.
Yeah, yep.
But
Do
All
I
right.
take that to mean we want an ordinance, addressing improvements on your old one and repealing the one on the RVs?
well, I was waiting for someone to make a motion.
I
if
would
that's
make a
okay.
motion that we repeal the old ordinance and update the one that Kim was speaking of to include towed vehicles or whatever, anything that's parked on the street more or less.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to repeal ordinance
Could
201.
could I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Could we, with consent of the movement and the second, just a motion to instruct staff to present an ordinance that repeals the RV one and also rewrites ordinance number,
13-300.
yeah, because until we have an ordinance in written form, we can't actually repeal one. You need an
Okay.
ordinance to repeal.
Got you.
If that's
You
okay.
can't just
Yeah,
take
thank
an
you.
ordinance off the book.
Yeah, you can, but you need another ordinance to do it. So it can't just be a motion from the floor, it's gotta be advertised, and we gotta have a title, and you gotta read it by title on the first reading and so on.
Fair
So,
enough.
so instead of just jumping right to the repeal, if the motion were to read that you wanna instruct staff to come up with an ordinance, then we'll have that ready for you next time.
I would like to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I will hear a motion to instruct staff to come up, to present an ordinance to repeal ordinance 2017-04 and make adjustments to, proposed adjustments to ordinance 13-300.
Do we have to deal with the motion on the floor?
I think that's what his motion's gonna be.
So then you
Yeah,
just
what
say
about the
so
first
moved.
motion he had? and
Well,
it was
I
seconded?
think we're just amending that
Ah,
with consent
I
of
thought we weren't
the
supposed to
movement
do
and the
that.
second. Yeah. Got it. We're good.
Second.
Well, it's been moved and seconded to instruct staff to write an ordinance or propose an ordinance to repeal 2017-04 and propose changes to ordinance 13-300. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. On to item number 2, discussion of trash and recycling department. So I'll let Kim weigh in on this, but just to preface this by saying that we're kind of at a critical point with our sanitation department. We have aging equipment. We have aging operators, not really. We have an operator who has a defined retirement plan or defined retirement date. And, so I guess I wanted to bring this discussion up to say that I think now is the time to decide whether we're moving full steam ahead with in-house sanitation department versus, maybe seeing what's out there in the private sector who, through an RFP process to, potentially privatize, Pine Bluffs trash service. So that was pretty wonky, but maybe Ken would like to say more about it.
Sure. You know, with the increased costs related to fuel, the significant cost of repairs to our aging trucks, as well as continuing to replace dumpsters. You know, we don't have any funds budgeted this year for any capital outlay, which means our dumpster replacement program has to stop, and we have no money in the coffers to potentially look at replacing a trash truck. Since this is an enterprise fund, there really isn't any grant money available for us to go out and buy a new trash truck. The expectation is that our department be self-sustaining, since it is an enterprise. You know, an example, our landfill fees alone increased by 14% this year. That increase alone wiped out our capital outlay funds that we normally put aside. So when you pair that with the costs of repairing the equipment that range around $17,000 a year, to all of the other increases, as well as the recruiting efforts needed, I think that we should potentially release an RFP just to see what's out there. It doesn't mean that we definitely have to privatize. I've read a few different articles from other municipalities that have considered privatization, and, you know, it was kind of a 50-50 as to whether they ended up doing that or whether they ended up keeping it in-house. But one thing I found interesting was that, you know, the desire to keep it in our local control, to keep customer service where it needs to be, is a good one. But the idea that there were some municipalities that actually required their trash department to submit a bid on the RFP also, I thought was pretty interesting. And it could really bring to light how much it would truly cost to bring our department up to where it needs to be financially. So that not only could we replace our equipment, but have money going into capital every year, so that we can replace aging equipment in a more timely manner, as opposed to waiting until it's being kind of limped along. And so while I'm not making a firm recommendation in either direction, I am recommending that we at least release something to see what's out there. We definitely would have to do some recruiting to fill that void, and we would need to start that probably within the next 30 days.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Have you considered leasing equipment?
We have not considered leasing equipment.
Is that something that we could at least check into?
We absolutely can look into that. And you know, and it may be that Lauren has looked into that. I'd have to get with him and see. I can tell you that a new trash truck would probably cost in the neighborhood of $225,000 to $250,000. And, you know, we just don't have that money in any capital reserves to make that happen.
What kind of delivery time are you looking at on, even if you did order a new truck?
Sure, so we would probably be looking at about 6 months,
Okay.
which is down from about 18 months.
I'd be shocked. I'm not doubting your numbers, but I would be shocked if we could get a bid on our trash truck for that amount of money, based on other craziness out there, but
Sure.
maybe it's come back in line a little bit, so.
Well, when we looked at the potential of purchasing a new trash truck a few years ago, it was under 200,000, so, surprisingly.
So,
Doesn't Wyoming state statute require that the utilities and things like trash removal, that they stand alone on their own merit?
Yes, they do.
And so if we're to do that, we're gonna have to see a substantial increase in trash rates to be able to continue to do the trash service that we're doing now, isn't, particularly if we're looking at purchasing a $250,000 truck. What does that look like as far as what we're gonna have to do to rates?
Sure.
yeah, and I think that's where it's valuable
Right.
that we don't, I'm not saying we have to do a full-blown proposal from our end to be competitive, but we need to know those numbers when comparing it to outside, companies. We're gonna need to do the full-blown, like, what's sustainable
Yeah.
cost comparison, not what we're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the thought wouldn't be, charging to come up with that 250,000 all at once. It would be more of a, if we take out a loan, what would our annual payments
Yeah,
be
you
if
have to
we,
prorate it.
if we anticipate trying to pay it off within 5 years so that we could start, getting some money built up to be able to purchase another new one in,
What's the realistic service life of a trash truck?
that I can't tell you.
About half of what we put this one.
Right, yes.
Do we have one truck or two?
We have two. We purchased the second one used because it was a cream puff. And unfortunately, it was really more on the citrus side, so. And it was purchased from another, government district in Wyoming. So, the second one that is also, we also struggle with, is used as a backup, and sometimes we use it to empty the recycle bins in the recycle center to take that material to. Yep. So it does serve as a backup, but, so I would recommend that if we were to keep it in-house and purchase a new trash truck, that, we would be able to potentially use one as a trade-in and still keep one of the other, the best out of the two, as a backup.
So I think the other thing, if we're comparing, to get probably the most honest bids out of people, I'm curious what everyone's feeling would be if we left it open-ended about what trash service looked like. So, we have a long history of dumpster service in Pine Bluffs. So, are we going to allow people to bid on this that prefer to use a rollout service? And, I mean, if that's off the table to everyone, we're specifying in the RFP so we don't get jammed up in terms of getting mostly bids. I think it's maybe unreasonable to ask them to bid it both ways, but maybe they could. I'm sure most companies would have a preference on which way that goes.
Yes.
I wouldn't mind leaving it fairly open-ended so we were able to see truly what is best for our residents for this current situation. Just to see what's available.
Letting them bid it whichever way they're most comfortable
Yeah.
bidding it.
I would agree with that.
Makes sense to me too.
And while I know we've had some discussions about how they would invoice for this, we have had some discussions in our billing department I think there's significant concern that if we were to continue doing the billing, while it's really not much of an effort on our part to leave it on the same card with water, sewer, and electric, I feel that it would be presenting the illusion that we are still responsible for the service.
Would we know how, not that we've asked you to dig into this, do you know if they, like Torrington, if they receive a separate bill? Torrington's privatized, I believe, to
Oh, are they?
Torrington
Okay.
Disposal Service.
Yeah, no, we can definitely reach out to Torrington.
When we
I understand what you're saying, it sounds really wonky to me to get this one separate little bill, but I also understand your point of view on it, for sure.
When we lived in Upton, it was privatized and we received our city bill and the bill from the guy that did the trash.
Separate?
Yeah. But he also, like, old school, like, dumped it,
It's a
so.
lot of fun.
I don't think it does that
So,
anymore.
at that point, the contract is between the citizen and the delivery service, not with the town, correct?
Correct.
So do we have any jurisdiction on rates?
We would not.
That's one of my fears with this. My other fear is that the size of the hammer goes from the size of this room to the size of this pin. Like, we have a giant hammer if we're controlling monthly payments to the company versus every individual. I don't know how that plays out in practicality, but, we have a lot more ability to sway their quality of service. I don't know.
Maybe prior to releasing an RFP for the next meeting, I can prepare for you a cost analysis of where our department needs to be, and what that rate structure would look like as a town entity.
I think that'd be handy.
Yeah.
That wouldn't take a lot of time to do. I could get something out to you ahead of the next meeting to look at, so that you could see where our rates would need to go. I know that we've been, kind of throwing different rate increases out there to our citizens, and it's unfortunate, but all of those same cost increases that the general public feels in their personal lives, the municipality feels as well when it comes to operating everything from our trash department to our water department to our recreation department, natural gas prices, insurance costs for our equipment in our facilities, as well as insurance costs for our personnel. Just general supplies and fuel.
Mayor, through you, I think people they have to get trash pickup by ordinance, right?
Yes,
So, so we're gonna have an ordinance that says to the resident, you have to have a private contract with a private contractor. How does that work?
well, I don't know, you're the lawyer.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about that.
We can definitely reach out to Torrington and see how they handle that.
Yeah, have you confirmed that some of these are direct pay? Or are they going through the town to make the payment to are the towns hiring the contractor to do the job? And then the people are bound by ordinance, with the town? Or is the town completely out of the loop and people are contracting with that private service provider?
Yeah, I don't.
Now,
I don't think either one of
electricity
us
is
can
not a
answer
big
that.
deal, cause everybody's gotta have that.
Sure.
We furnish our own, but a lot of cities obviously don't. And, I think gas, we don't do that, but If they need gas, they need gas. But I can envision people finding all kinds of workarounds for the trash if it gets too expensive.
I thought about
That's-
that too.
That's, I think, was part, well, I didn't say that, but that kind of adds on to my point is
Yes.
we have a lot of leverage as one lump sum, and we also have leverage that people take trash service, that they don't decide to take their neighbor's trash service or
Got it.
what have you. But
Sure.
my other thing, just to be, this is a bothersome government thing, but I would sure like to know that number. I'm not sure how much I'd like everybody else to know that number before the RFP is released.
Yes,
Like, I would like for all of us to know that number
yes.
about what it would take, but I find that inevitably someone bids exactly
Yeah.
what you can do. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm skeptical.
What's the rate now?
28, it's 21
Oh, that's right,
and
$28.
$7 for a landfill fee, so it's 28 for in-town.
Okay.
Residential,
Residential,
And
sorry,
that gets picked up every week,
twice a week.
twice a
twice
week.
a week? Wow. That's pretty good.
Yes.
And it's a dumpster, you can throw away as much as
Yeah.
you can
Put in it.
There you go.
put in it, yeah, basically, and if that one's full, you go find another one.
Yeah.
So it's actually
Unfortunately,
very
people that
generous.
don't live in Pine Bluffs
Do
and pay
that,
bills
exactly
here
that, you're right.
do the
Yeah.
same exact thing,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, we service a huge area of the county.
Yes, we do.
And-
Yeah, it's quite a county service for only one.
Yeah,
In
All right.
Colorado.
and Colorado.
I'm such a skeptic.
All right, so you're gonna
I-
present us with,
I will present
With
you
a-
with some numbers at the next meeting.
and also a proposed, I'm not holding you to getting an RFP thrown together by then, so whatever,
I can
whatever
work that.
timeframe that's on, I
Yes.
just think it should be on our horizon of things to consider.
What, as far as, you've got somebody who's gonna be retiring very shortly, do we have a backup plan to fill that void? Probably not gonna have somebody replace them before they're out.
No, we will be able to, fortunately, at the time of year, we should be able to handle it in-house. It will just require some juggling initially. It will also depend, some of that will depend on, we have an employee that is out right now on extended leave. And so when that, depending on when that individual comes back, will also determine how immediate our need is.
Yeah, delaying this decision is making it more challenging for you on that front.
A little bit, but, we currently have applications that have been coming in for our Public Works Department in general. And so we do have some applicants that we can be looking at.
Visitor comments. Department reports, Jenna.
The senior center, they, October 1st started their new fiscal year, and all funding has been procured for FY '24. That's all I have.
Awesome. Dave?
Don't have any report did not have an airport meeting this last month, and we haven't met again as the Joint Powers Board. Kim had mentioned to me last month a resource that the Historic High School could possibly look at to get some funding, and I did reach out to them here recently and kind of waiting for from information back. The state historical
Preservation Office.
Preservation Office, thank you. So, I'm hopefully gonna make contact there, and I think if I'm not able to get any satisfaction that way, probably involve Kim, because she has some experience working with them, so.
Great.
That's it.
Nothing new for me.
Nothing new for me.
Alex? Hope to have a charter ordinance for you next time.
Nice.
Great. Austin?
Jackie?
Liquor licenses, we finally heard back from the liquor division that we had a couple corrections that needed made, and I went ahead and published the public hearing, notices will run this week and next week. So that will take place at our meeting on the 25th. That'll be the public hearing for those liquor licenses
Public hearing's the 25th, and then
at 5 p.m.
at 5, and then, that's a two-step process, or we just have to go through the public hearing process?
Public hearing, and they'll be on
Okay.
the consent agenda. So then, hopefully those with corrections, we'll get those back ASAP, and we're good to go forward. That's the goal. That's all I have.
Great. Kim?
I have nothing new, just internal workings with audit and some other reports.
Great, thank you. Meetings and announcements?
Okay, so, October 25th at 5 o'clock will be our next meeting. And then also, we are to host the next quarterly meeting. So I met with Mayor Fornstrom and we discussed some dates. I ran those past Matt Hoppersmith for Sadie's to host. And we ended up with, I believe it was November 14th, which I believe is a Wednesday. No, 15th, sorry, right?
I think it's Tuesday the 14th.
Did we
but
do the
you-
14th? Hold on, it's on my Outlook calendar. You know, my lovely one that I have to get to.
Sorry. Dave wasn't paying attention, so that was just a waste
I
of.
know how much you
waste
love
of-
Darn
Outlook.
it.
No, I use Outlook, I just can't use them both.
And I'm slow, so.
15th is a Wednesday.
I felt like it was on the 14th, but
Gosh,
I'm pretty sure.
I
it's
love
the
Outlook,
14th.
I love it.
You told me the 14th at the beginning of the meeting, if that
I know
helps.
I did.
I'm
Don't
pretty, I'm
listen to
pretty
me.
sure that's right.
Is it something we can look up? Where do we
Yes,
find it? Or are you the only one that has it?
I think I'm the only one that has it.
You can
Of
make it
course I
whatever
am.
day you want.
Right? Just do
There's
what I
that.
say, it'll be fine.
How about you?
I think it was the 14th.
Wednesday, November 15th.
Oh, it is? Yep, okay. It's Wednesday. I'm pretty sure it's Wednesday, whatever date that is. Wednesday the 15th,
Is there a time on that?
6 p.m. at Sadie's. I'll be sending out the invites. I'll be sending you an email as a reminder.
So, just to be clear, the last thing I got from you via message was November 14th at 6 p.m.
Okay. there
So
go.
can you just confirm?
Yes.
And
Yes,
maybe
I
email
will
us?
definitely do that.
Either way,
And
it's
now let me
fine.
see. Yeah. Yes. I will do that, and then I will send you out an email. I think that's it.
And so, just to be clear again, when do we anticipate a newly scheduled meeting times?
Well, this one has been to the liquor division for
Sure.
a long time, so I don't, my understanding was when you changed the charter ordinance, that's when we were changing the meetings, but I
Okay.
can do it whenever
Yep.
you want.
Very good. I have the other dates on my, or times on my calendar still for November, so I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Anything else, anyone?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn, all those in favor?